allowing us to have a very short view and look at our mothers in Indra Valley. In my entire career, I've been traveling the globe and worked in many, many different countries and seen a lot of despair and unhappiness. Very few things have gripped myself so much as this project. And I would strongly recommend that you go and visit the project in Indra. As I said, it could be our house. This afternoon session is now open, and we will talk and discuss issues related to the uniformed services and violence against women. Please allow me to spend a couple of minutes on reflection from my perspective. And I will talk about the macro in this sense, and then my colleagues left and right will talk about the micro, i.e. the context of India. As I mentioned in my opening statement this morning, 20 years ago, the international community, through the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council, took a historic step by bringing to the Security Council, which is one of the very strong political bodies of the United Nations, a development and a social issue for the first time. And the development social issue was the impact of HIV/AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases and sexual violence in peacekeeping operations. Now, as you know, peacekeepers comes from what we call TCCs, troop contributing countries, and there are more than 100 troop contributing countries around the world, India being one of the bigger ones. A resolution was discussed and painfully passed at the Security Council. And I will really emphasize painfully, because it was not an easy subject to get clearance from the member states when you start talking about a sexually transmitted disease, sex, prostitution, men having sex with men, and whatever. And Kathleen, who has been playing a champion role in a separate gathering that took place in a special session of the General Assembly on HIV/AIDS in general, can testify to the days and nights we spent debating a small issue that we would consider today nothing, but resolutions were passed. Now, resolutions is one thing. As we heard today, there are 41 laws addressing issues of sexual violence or domestic violence in India. If we don't apply them, they are of very little use. And so it is with the resolution. So I and my colleagues were given the task by the Secretary General of addressing and implementing strategies in addressing the issue of the spread of HIV/AIDS in peacekeeping operations, in troop contributing countries at the basic and at the level of the recruitment, which General Singh will talk about a little bit later, and into the deployment phase, i.e. where the peacekeeping operation operates. And by doing so, one needed to have political support. You're dealing with an entity. I'm an officer myself, so I understand a little bit of the military thinking, which are very difficult to deal with from a civilian point of view, for reasons which I can understand. And you're dealing with an issue which at that time, you have to understand this was the end of the 1990s, the issue of HIV/AIDS, which was taboo in many, many environments, and especially amongst the uniformed services. So we started on extraordinary difficult journey by bringing down the barriers from the levels of the ministers to the command structure to the soldiers. I crisscrossed the globe. I visited more than 50 countries. I met with 37 ministers of defense and ministers of interiors in India, in Brazil, in Nicaragua, in Albania, etc. And at the end of this journey, we had a commitment from 37 ministers of defense that they would, under their leadership and representing the government, address the issue of HIV/AIDS, of sexually transmitted diseases and sexual violence. This is now more than 10 years ago. It is considered to be a success story. There has been many shortfalls. The whole issue about HIV/AIDS today, as you know from your own environment, it's not discussed in the open so often as it used to be, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. I come from the Western Europe, and there again, we have kind of forgotten that it's such a monumental problem when it comes to public health issues. So here we had a legislation, a strategy, a political commitment, and I do believe that I could say by and large, 95% of the world's uniformed services, armies, and affiliated branches had an HIV/AIDS strategy in their books. But as I said, shortfalls, we tend to forget. We think now with the introduction of the retroviral medicines that the problem is solved, and it's, as you know, absolutely not. On the contrary, one thinks that you know, the threat of being affected and infected by the virus is less, and that is not the case. I thought I just brought this macro picture into the environment of discussions today. And before I give the floor to my fellow speakers here, I want to highlight one visit I made was to a country in Central America, Nicaragua, whereby the president told me that domestic violence and sexual violence was one of his biggest problems and was considered the national security threat. And I think that's the case. That's the case in the global picture as well. So thank you for your attention. We might, if we have time, go back and visit this. I'd like to give the floor to General Bhopinder Singh, who is not only a very appreciated friend of mine through the years and problems we have worked through, but also one of the champions in India, who very early on, long time before the discussion at the Security Council and so on, took on his own addressing this problem amongst the rank and file. And it's my pleasure to give the floor to General Singh, who spent 45 years in the army of the Indian Army and retired as a 3-star general quite recently, and is the driving factor behind winning Singh of the Maitri as well. You have the floor, Bhopinder.
Thank you, Ulf. मैत्री की ओर से आप सबको होली की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं. On behalf of Maitri, I'd like to wish all of you a very, very happy Holi. मेरा थोड़ा सा आज गला ख़राब है और मुझे ये सख्त आदेश मिला है कि आपने बोलना ज़रूर है. तो दूसरी बात ये कि जितनी महिलाएं यहाँ पे हैं, मैं उनको इंटरनेशनल विमेंस डे के लिए बहुत बहुत बधाई देना चाहता हूँ. I'd like to congratulate all ladies in the hall for the International Women's Day. although it is my firm conviction that the ladies have every day of the year, it is not just one day. Pardon me. मैं अपना जो प्रेजेंटेशन है सबसे पहले आपको एक कहानी सुना के शुरू करना चाहता हूँ. उसके बाद थोड़ा सा अपने जवानों के बारे में जहाँ मैंने लास्ट में नौकरी करी थी. ये कहानी है एक लड़की की who got माफ़ करना ज़रा, who graduated from Miranda and was studying law. When she got married, it was arranged. The very first night, the husband said that, the husband told her that I married you on a rebound. I was in love with someone else and this has been forced on me. And from there, the differences started. He would blame her for every ills in his life, would gradually started violating her, domestic violence, which started with a slap for not laying the lunch in time or things like that. And it carried on increasing. Till one day, he threw her out of the house after giving her the violent, complete, you can say, complete course of violence that used to do earlier. That is the day she decided, no more of this. She took up a job, educated her daughters. I'm having a very bad throat, so it is virtually, I'm coming out with this story at a little pause. She educated her daughters, took loan, sent them abroad, settled them in life, and went into a divorce, parted company, did not take a penny from him. Then she decided, I'll stand on my feet, and got the complete necessities. She did get shelter from her neighbors and from her parents, relatives, but she did not take that for long and got onto her feet. Years passed, and she had a strong disliking because he was an army officer for the army, and more so for senior officers because they did not support her when she was fighting her case. But then God has his ways, and she bumped into another army officer, got married, and while the first one would put all the ills on her, the second one was having a setback in his career, and to his good luck, everything fell in place. He rose to a 3-star general. And went and took over an elite force in the northeast. There, she confided that I want to have a platform whereby we can give support to ladies who need help, because I was denied it, and we created Maitri. And that lady is Winnie. Winnie, please stand up. Please give her a big hand. Oops. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. And a bad throat. Two things have struck me together. This is what and how the genesis of Maitri took place. Then we took on to public health, HIV, moved to Delhi, and have not looked back thereafter. So I joke with her that domestic violence also has its plus points. Had you not had it, I wouldn't have met you. Okay. Sorry, I got a little emotional, but then I think she deserves it. Coming back to Assam Rifles, that is the force that I was commanding. I would like to tell you that domestic violence in the uniformed services has got a typical facet. We in the army train our soldiers to be offensive, to fight the enemy. And that psyche is ingrained into them right till the very last. Secondly, 2/3 of the army and paramilitary forces are deployed on the borders, fighting insurgency. They get just about a couple of days leave to go home. And therefore, psychologically, the outlook becomes a little frustrated. This, when the soldier goes back home, living with the joint family, the mother starts complaining about his wife. Before he has even entered the house, most of the money that he is carrying, he has taken some goodies for everyone and has also handed those to the mother, because that is how the joint families work. By the time he comes to meet his wife, he has had so much of complaint about she is this, she is that, she is vicious, that psychologically he is put her on a different platform. But I'm not giving any justification for domestic violence. Short period of leave and the conjugal marital rights at times have a very overbearing role to play in this domestic violence. So the soldier has to be counseled, and at the moment we have very little organized structure where we can counsel them. This counseling not only to the soldier but to the lady also, but because they live in the villages, our access to the families is for a very short period when they come to live with their husbands, and that is in rotation. So therefore, this facet which is missing is also one of the root causes of, firstly, violence, which I mentioned earlier, and also incompatibility. Incompatibility is also there on a different score, and that is that the ladies today are far educated. Soldiers tend to lag behind. The ladies, they live in an environment where they are exposed to the media, to all sorts of current gadgetries and the lifestyle outside. The soldier, poor fellow, is stuck in the field area fighting insurgency. So outlook changes. And this also brings about incompatibility and at times leads to domestic violence also. The other big issue is finance. The soldiers of all the services are not very highly paid. They have to look for or run two establishments. And that is a very big financial strain. The force where I was in the Northeast was another thing, that because they don't go home for long, they tend to get into an extramarital relationship and have to maintain yet another kitchen. So financial stringency leads to a lot of scuffle, and also domestic violence becomes the end result of that. Once again, counseling on financial management can obviate this situation. The domestic violence per se in the uniformed services is a command function. The earlier we realize it, the better it will be. Because when I was growing up, if there was a case of domestic violence, the commanding officer would tell the JCO that to send his family back, the end of all problems. But that is not so anymore. The ladies are not wanting to live in the villages to educate their children. They're leading an independent life. And the domestic violence has a direct bearing on his psyche when he is operating, sitting in an ambush day after day, night after night, or carrying out patrolling. So therefore, to get the best out of him, he has to be put to rest psychologically. And it is a command function whereby we have to counsel the soldiers from time to time. And this, it is coming out now gradually, and more the wise welfare centers are taking it on to do the counseling. But that also is only on a complaint, when the lady complains, and then it is carried out, and not taken to a logical conclusion in many cases. So if it is taken as a command function, I am positive that these cases will reduce and the fighting efficiency of the soldier will improve. We in Maitri are working towards this by conducting workshops in the uniformed services, paramilitary, and in the state police forces. It's a structured workshop whereby they are given, both soldiers and the first session, second session, the families, given out their rights and what exactly is domestic violence, so that the lady understands. Most of the time they come to know only when the thrashing starts. And soldier also does not realize it till then, so the soldier also has to be taught as to what is the tenets of domestic violence. And in these workshops, we bring it out in the form of a play, a playlet, questionnaire, and presentations. And the feedback has been that it does have an impact. And hopefully someday it will be a structured workshop in the curriculum of training of the soldiers. This is all that I had to say regarding the domestic violence. If there's any question, I'll take it on later. I'd like to hand you back.
Thank you so much for